Welcome back to What Problem Are You Solving? This is a little podcast about lean startup innovation and all sorts of other fun things. Me, John Ruark, Ty Smith, Adam Burke. As always, the first question of the week is, what problem are you solving? So let's start with Adam. What problem are you solving this week?
Answer. Your name is Adam. All right, we're trying to solve some April Fool's problems.
April Fool's on us.
All right.
There he is.
That
was a nice,
minimally viable, unviable April Fool's joke.
minimally viable Adam. Good.
Love it. Love it. That's smart. My kids are too big. They'd look at me like, what do you want?
What are you doing?
What? Why are you bothering me?
It's basically a lot of that, but
Basically. Well, that's great. So you have a future innovator in training. Good to see all of you again this week. Adam, what problem are you solving this week?
You want the same B-roll, or you want something new?
Hey, it's something new.
We trained, instead of training the mentees, we looked at the mentors. It's the way to see some inflection points in an ecosystem. So that's what problem I tried to solve last week. Training mentors to add a bit of scale to an ecosystem.
That's great. Awesome. Ty, what problem are you solving this week?
So I'm trying to solve how to, I don't know how successful I am, but how to integrate organizations that have no idea about how to get into the government space, and the government space that has no idea how to connect with those who have never been in the government space. So they look at each other like some kind of, I wish I knew chess, but it feels like it's one of those chess, those stalemates. Like, are you moving? No, I'm not moving. Are you moving? No, I'm not moving. We're just going to look at each other and admire the problem. So that's basically where we're at. That's one of the problems I'm trying to solve.
Nice.
What I feel like we got some space opening in May. Let's get a guest from Startup Side's Easy. Let's get a government guest that's allowed to talk about that stuff, because my instinct, people were talking about these, startup studios or venture studios. They're doing it on the corporate side too. Let's talk about that in a couple weeks.
Interestingly enough, there is a woman who just put her stuff out on LinkedIn that she's leaving government service, who worked in spaces that John and I used to work with. Her name is Mary, last name F. I won't put her name out there right now. Who was a chief innovation officer in one of the intelligence community agencies. And I'm not doing anything that's classified because she put herself out there. So
right. Well, cool.
But she's trying to work on that. I actually reached out to her like, maybe we could talk. So that's a good pool, Adam. I'll give that a shot.
Well, I know you get anxious. You look at that timer, although I don't see it today. But I don't want to eat into that too. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff with the Air Force, and that's public. Air Force and Techstars is public. What else?
Nice.
What's called? What's the Incutel's public? That's a public.
Yep. There's a lot of work out there that I think that this kind of methodology could take advantage of, because as we all know, people want to back into a solution. They want to back into a problem by creating a solution. It's like, what are you doing? Stop it. So, and as interestingly enough, I was having a conversation earlier today where a big mentor protege in the academic space, the mentor was like, well, we need to, and John, your ears should have been burning, because I told the story of 70 engineers. Why do you need 70 engineers? Because we got them. Well, what would you do with 7? I don't know. We just have 70 engineers we got to put in a place. And I'm like, don't do that. But we don't have enough time. And Adam, this will make sense to you. We don't have enough time we have more than enough time to do it over, but we don't have enough time to do it right.
I hear that so much.
It's nuts, man. I wish people would say, you know what, would do the math, right? Because the math at some point works. That if you spend the time up front, as Einstein said, if you had an hour, spend 55 minutes just figuring out what the devil you're doing and 5 minutes solving, but we flip it.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a government issue either.
No, not necessarily. The incentives are probably more perverse in the government space, but it's not unique either. So good call.
I think on that, and again, I don't want to take over the episode. I think a solution looking for a problem blindly is way worse than I've seen instances where if you do have if it's a fixed cost and you're paying people and they need to feel fulfilled, and like I actually don't think that's as bad of a waste of resources. Like, yeah, if you have 70 people in there, just
he was on a roll too.
But I will say, while he gets back on, it's also demoralizing, right? So if you are on one of those contracts that, like, yes, it's better to keep them busy, but at some point, right, there's a difference between busy work and productive work, and your smart people are going to leave, right?
Yeah.
Your coasters, they're going to be fine. They're just going to ride it out. But your smart creatives, like Google calls them, they're not going to stay in a do busy work for busy work's sake kind of environment.
Because I think it comes down, and we talk about this on this show a lot, is it comes down to value creation. And value isn't just a monetary piece.
No, not at all.
On the output, value really does come down to, do I feel like I even am producing anything? The old commercial, not another day or time to make the donuts. That's because the person's just dragged out and I don't see any value because I've done it over and over again. But I think to your point, is that even when you are doing something coding and you just feel like there's nothing that's happening as a result, why would you do that? Why would you do that to yourself?
Exactly.
I know I couldn't.
Life's too short for that. Exactly.
You kiss my butt on that one.
Yeah. So, hey, Ty, you know what problem I'm solving this week?
You know what? Hold on. Hey, John. What problem are you solving this week?
I'm glad you asked.
No problem there, buddy.
Adam was taking that first exit off the highway. Come on, let's go. So I'm on travel this week. Since I'm a remote worker, actually meeting once a quarter to meet with my team. And the problem we're solving is what work are we planning on doing over the next quarter? So we are doing like a quarterly planning thing, engaging with all the customers and all that kind of stuff. So it's a flexible way of not planning the whole year out. We just kind of plan a quarter at a time. And surprisingly, we get pretty close to what our in-person planning sessions do and get the outputs they target.
So I'm curious about that. Is there a part of that is, hey, he's back? So John, repeat what's your problem so Adam catches up.
My problem is I'm on travel because I'm meeting with my team to do quarterly planning with the team. So we're all going to be in person, face to face, hashing it out with all our customer engagements and trying to figure out what our quarterly plan is. And so we've done this in person once a quarter for about past year and a half, and it's been very effective to get all of us remote people together in one place and plan together and kind of socialize together too.
I can't. What's the planning plan? Is there a whiteboard? Are there sticky notes? Is it OKRs? Are you putting one single goal? Or is it a continuation of a
we're not software developers. We are kind of like project managers and coaches, and we do loosely kind of follow what would be like very close to like the Scaled Agile framework, like quarterly planning, but we adapt it for our type of work as well, and we just gather up all of our big chunks of work of different customer sets that we have because we're a bench of coaches. So we kind of go off for short or long-term engagements with customers and see how we're doing and what work we have lined up for them. So that way we can make sure that the benefit that comes out of that is not just a plan, but actually we're just talking about, are we effectively resource utilized? Meaning, are we just doing busy work or are we doing value-added work? Especially because we've actually got more work now than we can handle. So it's really good and effective because for our boss, it gives her a cut line. She can say, my team's great. we can't shove 10 pounds of crap in this 5-pound bag. This is the 5 pounds we're not going to do. And she takes that right up the flagpole, takes it right up to her bosses and her boss's boss and says, hey, you either need to cut us some slack or hire more people. We can justify exactly how many people we need with data.
The part that I like about that is, the cascade. And I know that one of the things you want to talk about is removing friction. And it seems to me that is a one way to remove friction to help you solve problems, right? Because if you can't, there is a huge problem, Mythbusters notwithstanding, where they tried to shove 10 pounds of crap into a 5-pound bag. And as they did it, all this excess stuff came out. Right. But it seems to me that what you're doing is the prioritization of what's important really dictates where to play, how to win. And if you can figure out where to play, how to win, now you're like, I know, because you've now defined what winning looks like. And I can say, that ain't us. That ain't us. That we're removing that part of that problem.
And you're gonna love me, Ty, because I did use the playing to win strategy with our office back right before the beginning of the fiscal year. So our boss knew exactly what our goal was. Instead of just coaches doing busy work, she knew exactly which projects she prioritized over others.
Well, it's interesting because Adam, do you know what we're talking about? This Roger Martin's playing to win cascade. Do you know that? Just so, because it'll make complete sense to if you don't know it.
I guess he can't
hear us. No, he can't. He's trying to figure it out. But for the sake of the audience, the idea that you have to be able to answer these questions. You good to go, bud? You back? Nah, he ain't back yet. He's having computer issues. But for the sake of the audience, the fact that you can figure out with very simple questions what becomes important, right? I had an old boss. I asked, like, what's the North Star? What is an indication that we're winning? And I'm sure you did this. And I got a metric. I was like, what? Oh, we'll be faster, or this particular product will cost less. I don't know what that means.
Right.
So do you mean you fire everybody and you give it, and which they end up doing, you give all the work product to somebody else's group? Okay, that's fine. But you still haven't solved a problem of a more effective, efficient, value-added product that make people's lives better, that removes the friction, that lessens the pain or creates benefit, gain. There you go. I actually love this cascade.
Oh, I use it all the time. Yeah, but that's for a different show. That's for a different topic. But
well, yes and no. I mean, yes, it is for a different topic for a different show. And maybe one day we could get Roger Martin actually come on and have a conversation with us. I would be absolutely. I don't know. Fun fact: there was a tweet. This has been 2 years ago or more, and he said something, and I said, "Oh yeah, that sounds like Jay-Z's lyric that says, I'm not a businessman. I'm a business, man." And he's like, I love it. And he tweeted back, he's like, I love that quote. I use it all the time. So maybe one time we can get him on. But I think from startup world, it is absolutely foundational from a strategy standpoint.
Absolutely.
Be able to designate that and experiment. The part that I love about it, and I'm sure you guys do, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, is that it's about experiments, that you experiment your way. You have a hypothesis. In the very first thing, this is what winning looks like. How do you know?
Yeah. So in fact, we actually prioritized which customer segments we wanted to target. Like, where will we play? And we put them in priority order because we had more work than we knew what to do with. And then we actually had like our perfect customer fall into our lap right after we did the strategy. And so we immediately, that's the top of the list. The cut line goes down. We had to say no to customers because we had made a choice. Based on our strategy. So yeah, it worked. It worked really well.
Well, here's what's interesting from a startup perspective. Are you back? All right. So here's what's interesting from a startup perspective is that at times by saying no, you actually gain more customers because there is this thing that says, how, clutch my pearls. How do they say no to us?
How dare they?
What do they know that we don't? Or what ain't we doing that? And all of a sudden on the back end, these people are like, oh my God. And especially the closed system and laboratory like you work in. Oh my God. I don't know what's wrong with y'all, but these guys are great.
Yeah.
Wow.
And we can be more effective. That's the thing. We're not spread thin. We're effective. We're putting the most bang for the buck. Yeah. So anyway, I digress.
So did you hear what we were talking about, Adam, with the strategy cascade? Did you? That was where we were going with this.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, cool.
April Fool.
Whatever, man.
Speaking of removing friction, imagine if you were Adam trying to connect to this platform. And every time he gets close, it drops out, the audio cuts off, and he's got to drop out. That's the friction that we're talking about.
Gotcha.
So thank you for demonstrating what friction looks like.
Yeah. Obviously. Broken clock is right twice a day. That's
There you go. No, but I don't know how much you heard, Adam, but seriously, we were talking about like, what does it mean to create value by removing friction, utilizing that cascade framework that Martin put out, like what's winning look like? Where do you play? How do you win? What are the resources? What are the management? What are the key things, activities, or process projects, and what are the resources that have to be in place? And I think that's startup world, right? That's startup world. You've got to identify, like, we believe that this is what our winning aspiration is, right? Why we're even in the game. And then the next two, and I know when I was working with John more heavily, we've really tried to get people to focus on steps 2 and 3 because it's iterative by nature. I mean, if you just look at the arrows, and that's what we've been barking on for the last 3 months is build, measure, learn. But in our experience with set systems, they run immediately to the bottom right.
Just how do we reorg? How do we set up a management structure? How do we do the time cards correctly without knowing what are we doing? What problem are we solving?
What's the bottom right again?
What management systems did we need? Right.
So in the business model canvas, they go immediately to the left-hand side, which I'm okay with, except for the fact that you still don't have a sense of what you're valued. I think that, Adam, you started off before your system went down, that sometimes you have a technology. Cool. But if you just start willy-nilly running a technology versus understanding the technology's relationship to a pain, that's a lot of time wasted. And I think that's frictional.
Yeah, I think having a technology versus having capacity versus having, yeah. I don't know that having capacity and having technology aren't necessarily the same thing. And I was trying to make a distinction between, where government or corporate has a fixed capacity for something, and that could be for customer discovery, right? It could be, if you're able to.
I think. Correct me if the term you're trying to get to. I think I've heard the term defined as cost centers, where they just know they have sales, they know they have marketing, they know they have engineers. Right. So they're going to have them do sales, marketing, engineering regardless. Right. And so then it's just prioritizing what they actually do and what they work on and what their next, that value stream or stream of income will be.
Yeah. I wonder if any, like I used to think it would be cool when there was pair programming or, if you really didn't have, and this is an oversimplified version, but when a cross-functional team was doing customer discovery, the engineer is the scrum master.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. And when they're executing and writing code, the sales folks or the anthropologists are the scrum master. And so that's a way of, and I remember years and years ago also, people were talking about agile in the way of like agile team, like actually up and
huge fan of that,
and moving teams around.
Right.
The term even for that. And I remember that was like something like, oh, conferences are valuable. I learned something just 10 years ago.
That one Agile conference 10 years ago paid off.
But yeah, we can move on.
No, I got a question though, and this relates to what John wanted to talk about, and I want to hear what both of you have to say in terms of friction, like, and those you call them cost centers or reducing friction. How expensive is friction in your discovery process? And expensive in terms of time and talent, treasure, because it seems to me that anytime, I mean, if you don't put oil in your car and those pistons start, you will blow your engine by wearing your pistons
friction
out.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. But if I didn't have friction with my behind on this chair, every time that I sat down, right? Mm-hmm. And so the question is, when does, in a startup or in innovation, let's not even go startup, let's go with innovation, is friction both valuable and wasted and costly? I know it's kind of deep.
So I'll jump in because I think it's a good jumping off point. So in general, like negative friction are, the things that the customer is finding frustrating. We talk about pains, right? The customer pains. A lot of those pains are frustrations using the alternative, or it's the time waiting for something, right? Or it's something that's not intuitive from a UX perspective, right? Those are all things that are potential opportunity costs, right, to do innovation on, right? If you can solve that for them, you don't have to even solve the whole system. You could just solve that one thing, like Easy Pass, right? You still have to drive on the same road, but you get a special lane, right? So that is something people are willing to pay for to remove the friction of sitting in traffic, right? It doesn't always have to be that way. So now the other side of that too is if you don't have an upsell or an exclusive path, you can have, like, you could just remove friction for everybody. So think about if you've ever been through a Chick-fil-A drive-through, right? Their target, at least I know the target in the DC metro area is that from when you place your order to you pick up your food is 60 seconds for all their stores. I don't know if that's nationwide, but I know that is in the DC metro area. And so you don't have an Easy Pass for Chick-fil-A, right? You don't pay more for that speed. That's the friction of removing for all customers so that they have a great customer experience. Then to your other point of is some friction necessary or some friction okay? And I will say there are times where you could, for example, deliver a product too fast, right? And your customer might not be ready for it. They might say, wait, I just learned the previous operating system. Why are you pushing out Windows 45? I just learned Windows 11, give me a minute to get used to that. So that might be where your customer should be pulling when they're ready, not pushing the product in front of them or pushing the solution in front of them. So that's just my 2 cents. Adam?
I think we got to break down I hate to always unpack the word because as soon as you're going to say the cost of friction, I mean, I think I spent my first 10 years maybe still mentoring and still now using the butterfly story. You need to struggle. There's positive. What is the cost of friction? Sometimes there's a benefit to friction, right? So I think, again, without saying we need to unpack the term, I think friction versus efficiency friction is just either the problem that we're trying to solve. So we're either using that in terms of what problem does the customer want solved, and anything getting in the way that is just an obstacle could be what we're calling friction. On the efficiency side, like, how do I make money? How do I capture value? And anything that gets in the way of that is friction. So those are the sort of the negative, agile, what's a blocker or what's friction. I think these are all different terms because I always use it the opposite, that, like, we've all as lean coaches, we've heard of the high hurdle test, where it's like put friction in front of early adopters to prove that, you're selling something valuable.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah.
I always, again, this is early stage mentoring, early stage startup stuff, but it's like, you want to put more friction in front of people to see, to get to avoid false positives. So
can you give me an example of that?
Well, I keep forgetting that. Google the high hurdle test or pull it up. And this is where I like that we have
all right, the real time. Here we go.
But and a counter or an anti-example is I always call it the free pizza experiment. It's like, download my app, and come to our open bar or free pizza party. And then the founders say, look, everybody loves our app. It's like, no, everybody loves free pizza. You overdid it in the removing friction. And it's like, we have loss leader. And I was guilty myself of, it's loss leader. Well, no, loss leaders only work when you've proven something already and you're scaling. That's when you want to remove friction. That's when you want to fill the funnel faster. That's when you want to optimize things. Like, to me, that's the friction, removing friction answers. Like, we know this is working. How do we scale? How do we go faster? How do we remove the value creation on the customer side? How do we increase value capture on the organization side? But there's a whole different nuance of friction. Yeah, the high hurdle test, validation, currency. We all learn these terms like currency. Like, okay, you have a good idea. Prove it. What's the term you always use, Ty? Not prove it, or how do you know? No, what do you always say to your, like,
what must be true?
Yeah. What? Yeah.
Yeah. So here's an example, right? There's a couple of them, like style profiles that Stitch Fix. They make you fill out like your style favorites and stuff, and it takes like an hour to fill out.
Yes.
Right. And so they want to know that you're a passionate customer who's willing to put the effort in so that they get great recommendations on the outside. Or you see Financial Times conducted a high hurdle experiment by adding delays to their site for different user groups to assess the impact on engagement. So yeah, you have to be really clear about what you're trying to learn, what experiment or what hypothesis you're trying to test.
And I think that's the key difference. Like, there's this idea of, there's a difference between artificial scarcity,
right,
and intentional friction, right?
I like that. Yeah.
So like artificial scarcity, let's just not let people in. That's not a plan. That's like
it's an exclusive club and you're not allowed in.
That's like hope is not a plan, or hope is not a strategy kind of thing. Like, let's just not let people in so that they want to come, which unfortunately does work. They were like the million pixel experiment, and that stupid app that cost $10,000 that did nothing, and it was just but for the most part, exclusivity for exclusivity's sake is not the same exact thing to me as a high hurdle test, and putting friction in place to learn something specific about the intensity of demand from your users or potential users. And then the other thing, whenever I think of this topic, it's just so much fun to think about. Like, an airplane takes off into, like, you think like, it needs that extra push, so you take off with the tailwind. It's like, no, that's the exact opposite. You need friction to grab onto something. So to me, that's the ultimate. I don't know, is it a metaphor? Is it an illustration? But to me, that's the ultimate, where taking off into the wind, you need something. You need friction, or I think the example you gave with Ty falling, like, you need traction or friction to keep from sliding on, or to grab onto something. Like, if you're on a rock, if you're climbing a mountain, like, you need friction. You need to get a foothold on something. So I think they're totally two different things. And now I'm watching the clock.
I think I'm watching it too. We ain't got to worry about it. We got time. I got 15 minutes, whatever. I think that I'm not suggesting that we're redefining we're redefining anything. I don't think that's the case. But these are the conversations. These are the conversations to me that feel really, really interesting, because what we've done in 3 minutes or these last 5 minutes, is to begin to redefine language, right? Because John walks in and says, I want to talk about how to reduce friction. But what we've all three of us now said is that actually understand it, and in some cases increase it. increase, because now what you're doing is you're utilizing the resource. John, you're the engineer of the three of us. First law of thermodynamics: energy can either be created or destroyed. And so, if that's the case, what we have now defined, and I think that the listeners will be able, I think they'll catch on to this, is that don't try to get rid of it, the friction that you're experiencing. Understand the friction that you and that your customers are experiencing.
You've really got to know it first. Exactly.
Really, really understand it. Get underneath it, unpack it, because you just might find, to your point, Adam, like there's something here. How do we get more lift, right? How do we create even an airplane, like a greater attack angle, so we get more lift, which is where the friction's coming from? Because if we don't do, and we try to bring down, you'll stall your plane. Yes. Right? Trying to remove too much of it, it'll just fall like a rock, right? And so I learned something tonight, because I'm thinking about my students. It's something, what I'm hearing is something that we wouldn't say normally, but I think it's a reconceptualization of the startup, the founders that I'm working with. Like, say, Smith, they're not taking it up. Cool. Find out why.
Yeah. Right. I could not agree. I could not agree more. And again, whenever I see a team and I did this myself, but it's like, oh, we need to fix, spending months on the onboarding process. And it's like, they're not activating because it's confusing. Like, right. And I see this a lot. This is a very known at this point. And it was big. There were even startups that evolved to solve this problem, where there was onboarding videos and all that stuff. And yes, at some point, if John's backlog, when demand outpaces supply and you're losing actual customers that would have converted otherwise because they're frustrated and they're going somewhere else. But if you're optimizing, I forgot to say, you're fixing the non-broken part, you're optimizing a part of the funnel that is not the issue. Right. And you're removing friction so much, almost like adding negative friction by adding loss leaders and incentives to get people into a funnel that that's not the problem.
Wow. That's a good point.
It's really interesting to watch.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking of some of the comments that I've seen in previous shows. I think people are going to get a lot out of this one, what we're doing right here, this last 10 minutes. Because I think that what we're saying is that take advantage of those friction points. Just don't try to eliminate them. Take advantage of them, because one of the things that I did hear when we were talking about it, 10 minutes ago, was friction is learning. You've learned in some spaces about, if I add more friction, what did I learn? If I take away more friction, what did I learn? If the friction stays the same, and the learning is not just learning for learning's sake, to your point, Adam, if I add more friction, will it increase my throughput? If I reduce it, will it increase my throughput? Because ultimately, it's not the metric or the output, it's the outcome that you're going for.
Right.
And at each one of those friction points is an output of something in the system, right? Every time I put my foot down, I didn't slip. Cool. I learned something else. I put my foot down again. I slipped. Well, something was on the floor, right? Mm-hmm. That didn't allow me to continue my locomotion forward.
That reminds me of what you said was, there's an adage about automation, right? That you shouldn't automate bad processes, right? Because and then AI, you shouldn't even apply AI to bad processes, right? So step one is actually identify the friction and remove that once you have a working, value stream, concept to cash kind of thing, so that then you can automate that, optimize it, like you said, so that eventually you can then do other things. Because when I set up the show, this is really great, because this is, again, going in a path completely different than what I was thinking.
Hey, leave it to me.
Yeah, well, this is great. This is the beauty of having the diversity of thought, right? Because what I was thinking was, as someone who hates standing in line, as someone who has pains as they're using a product, There's things like Sam's Club Scan and Go, fantastic technology, right? Where you can just take your mobile phone, log in with your Sam's Club ID, and you can literally scan the barcodes in your cart. And then all you do is just press the pay button and you're done. You can just walk to the person checking receipts at the door. You don't have to stand in line. You don't have to put it on the cart. You can leave everything in your cart. And then all you do is just show a unique QR code that pops up. They scan that to make sure you paid, and then they scan, boop, 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 scan about 3 things in your cart to make sure that it matches the whole integrated system on the back end. Yes, you did buy the 3 boxes of strawberries. Cool. You're on your way. And that alone, that one piece of technology, I know for a fact saves me about 10 minutes per trip. Right.
Yeah, you're the customer for that.
Yeah.
And that's great. Like, searching for inefficiencies is a great way to solve a problem and start a business.
Because I'm already there. I'm already in there. I'm already in the space. They already have me as a customer.
Right.
Now they're just going to make my experience even better by removing friction. Right. They're going to relieve some pain that I have when I'm using their product.
I'm staring off into the sunset off camera, not at anything, but just in thought, because it is, to me, how do you explain this to founders in a way who has like just this idea? Because I know, Adam, you and I have spent time, John's in a very different kind of founder experience, but you and I sit with founders and like, I got this idea. And now I'm like, cool, I'm glad you got an idea. And it's saying, so at what point did you run into a wall or watch people run into a wall and they could not get over it? Right? Because I think most of the time we go, so what's the pain? Right? And they go, oh, well, there's a pain. But like, literally saying to them, at what point did you or somebody you know just run into and could not go any further to do something they wanted to do? Simple language.
Yep.
I think this is the epitome of what we set out to talk about. I mean, it's all based on the human at the end of the day, because I remember when we ran workshops, it's like, oh, waiting in line, I'm going to remove all the efficiency of waiting in line at restaurants. It's like, I don't know. That's a fun way to kill 20. I don't want to wait 3 hours. And then you need tech and all these apps that save my place or text me whenever or even a physical device of when your food ready, and all these innovations that do solve problems. But it's like, it comes back to the relationship with the human. Like, John and I am assuming on a Saturday night, like, he wants his table right now, and I'm like, I'll wait. Is there a rerun on TV at the bar? Like, I don't know.
Well, it's funny. Like, I don't know if we used this example in the previous episode, but agency I used to work for, they went to virtualized desktops, and they were having a long time to boot up. Really, I'm like, this is like tens of thousands of people are turning on their computers in the morning. It's super slow. And so, what did everybody do? They got up from their desk after they logged in and went over to the coffee pot. And so, if you had looked at it purely from a technology perspective, if you had optimized the boot up time, that would actually reduced collaboration amongst people in the office, because now they're catching up not only on personal stuff but work as well while their system boots up. So in fact, improving one would have actually been a negative for the other.
Yeah, those stories are that also shows how the milkshake marketing, why that was so important, of actually observing what's
right. Exactly.
And I think it's also, we'll start. I know you'll get. But he's really coming in a couple of weeks, so we won't say his name. But the guy who talks about alternatives, I think, and triggers to the problem, like, what just discovering a pain point is not enough. Like, what is switching cost? What are they doing in the face of that problem, and how do they solve it? Identifying the problem is half the battle, but how are they solving it?
Yeah, what's that trigger?
Like the junk mail I use all the time. Like, okay, fine, junk mail's a problem. So their solution is they throw it in the garbage, right? And so that's not creating the value, but it is that you're talking about. So not only there's lack of a problem, I just throw it away in the garbage, and there's actually the problem actually creates value, which is a rare. We should do a whole list of like problems that actually not only were they not neutral, they actually created value. I think that's
problems that create value.
Yeah.
I think that was like my mom's nickname for me.
So it's interesting that you would say this because, John, you said something that triggered for me that it's about the human ultimately, right? So if I were to solve a technological problem, it creates additional human problems, right? And so in physics, so I'm going to go there real quick. So it's a little bit of physics I remember from high school. There's gravitational and normal forces. That's what allows you to stand. As much as the force due to gravity, my 182 pounds, and by the way, guys, I'm losing weight. Yay, I'm getting there. Because I was like almost 190. I'm like, this ain't cool, man. This ain't cool. All right. I have a normal force of 190 and a gravitational force of 190 pounds. There's another force that's coming up that's equal to 190 pounds that allows me to stay still. So nature has learned how to resolve this technology, these two opposing forces. And I think that what we are talking about in the learning in startup world and innovation world is how to find the right balance so you don't fall down.
Value equilibrium.
Yep. There's an equilibrium between the human, the fiscal, and the technological forces. Feasible, viable, desirable. We know that, right? But we're trying to find the right balance between all of those, and the people that we work with, we're trying to help them understand, like, what's the right balance? You got all in on your people side, and you screw up on your technology side, you have no value. That cost value dynamic is, and so I think it's incumbent upon coaches, it's incumbent upon founders to resolve it as inexpensively as possible. Like, how do you get to that? I mean, that's where it comes down to, like, and I've been using that, by the way, don't have a learning circle that's this big, because that's hugely expensive. Get one that's this big so you can figure out, like, we all have kids. How did Nathan learn how to stand? Right?
Lots of experiments.
Lots and lots of small ones.
Mm.
My kids are now soon to be 21 and 19. I don't know nothing about that no more, man. Nothing. They have a whole new set of stand-up problems.
Yeah.
Right? Wow. This is interesting, guys. I appreciate it. This was a good one.
Mm-hmm.
This is a good conversation.
Yeah, but I like the way you categorize it too, because it's not just, so we talked about a technology like optimizing processes. We talked about the human, like the behavioral economics part of it. Humans are going to react to different things. And there's even, again, there is like the financial, there's the viability friction as well of like, well, I kind of want to switch, but that costs too much money, or that's too much for my paycheck, right? And so how do you, there's tons of experiments you can do to optimize reducing friction for value creation as well, or for at least, for getting paid, whether it's something as simple as, I'll set up Stripe on my website so I can take a credit card, or all the way up through, how do you do that value exchange, and can you do it more efficiently? So you got me thinking a whole bunch of different ideas too about what does removing friction look like from value creation, value capture.
I can't wait to have some of our friends that are outside, that are actually known. I would love to ask him this question.
Name names. I'm scared of John, but you can do it.
Oh, shoot. So for those that are,
looks like you've been muted. Sorry, you've been muted, Ty.
Yeah, I actually muted you.
and you're gonna love that when they come on.
Any questions?
That was not funny.
But seriously,
yeah.
For those that are listening to us, there's going to be, we have some ideas on some guests to bring on that will help us explore some of these topics from where they sit, because they are just as expert as everybody else, all of us, and in some ways have been thinking about this even more intensely. So we want to make sure that you come back and listen to what they have to say, and more of that to come.
Yep. All right, Adam, final thoughts on removing friction. Good, bad, and different. What say you?
Here's my, although you know, big screen, this was an interactive one. Is time on site, increased time on site, a good metric or a bad metric?
Ooh, it depends.
It does. Yeah.
That's a good one.
So that I remember. So that was what we used to. That's how we used to prove this point with early stage startups. Like, yeah, time on site is, you know, because retention they would conflate it with like, oh, they're really getting value. But if they're lost or they're confused, you know, time on site or time on your login page, because they can't figure out how to get through is not actually a good metric. So it depends.
Unless you experiment to add that friction, that high hurdle test.
But even that, well, yes, I guess if you're literally, I would still structure a high hurdle test by getting more data and not just seeing how long they'll agonize in the confusion.
Yeah, that's just torture at that point.
Right. If you're gonna run a high hurdle test, get more data, not more pain. Make it more valuable on your side, not more painful on their side.
Love it. All right, Ty.
All right, removing what I think about is that tongue in cheek, not all friction is bad friction. But understanding why it's friction is the powerful lesson.
I like it.
Yeah.
Cool.
And John, how about you? What did you learn?
You know, again, I like that because I was not expecting that high hurdle test thing to kick in, to think about what are those ways we can create friction to see if we're generating value. So I got to chew on that. That's really good. You made me think, and I appreciate that about you guys. So otherwise, like, I'm always thinking about the efficiency side of me. As a recovering engineer, I'm always thinking, how can I make this process that I'm in more efficient, whether it's driving to work, whether it's checking out in the store, whether it's cleaning the house. I don't care what it is. I'm always trying to think of optimizing, of removing the steps to get the same value on the back end, you know, as you're done, but do it in the most efficient way possible. So that's the efficiency engineer in me kicking in. But yeah, you're giving me lots of other things that are not process or technology to think about, especially because we all do this for humans. So at the end of the day, remember, you know, you're building things for humans. So make sure that you're optimizing for the human, not for your technology. So good stuff. All right. We'll see you next time.
Hey, gentlemen, it was good. I love working with you guys. This is every time, just one last thing. Every time, you know, I go, my God, we have 45 minutes. And I look up, it's like, holy smokes, we only got about 5 minutes left, which is a good thing. It's a good thing.
Talking to you removes my friction.
There you go.
See you next week.